Sophia Conway is an Irish poet and author residing on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. Much of her inspiration comes from nature and experience as a mother and immigrant. Her work has been publicly exhibited in three solo shows, and in 2025, she released two full-length poetry books, Someday Somewhere Beautiful, Casa Book, and Crumbs and Constellations. Sophia has done spoken word performances and led an interactive haiku poetry workshop at the Sakura Day Japan Fair 2024. She was honored to be chosen as a Confluence Fellow 2025 to 2026 and continues to be a member of the League of Canadian Poets. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Sophia Conway. Welcome on the show, Sophia. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, actually. I think when two poets are talking together, it's a beautiful one, and I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be very exciting. So, thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Sophia, we're going to get into all that inspired you to write Someday, Somewhere Beautiful, a West Coast Motherhood, which I so much love the title name. It sounds to be quite captivating, quite intriguing. It's one that someone would pick up like, oh, that's an amazing title. I'd love to see what it's all about. Very intriguing, quite captivating, I must say. But then you've been a writer now for the past 4 years, and you've even published multiple titles aside from Someday Somewhere Beautiful. I want to ask you, what is your first creative spark as a writer? How did you get started into writing? How did you get started? And how did you come to selecting poetry as a genre for yourself? How you come started into writing? I think I've got a lot in there actually, but if you can run us through your creative process, the start of
Mhm.
your writing career, that would really be great.
Yeah, I used to write as a child and a teenager a lot, but as in my adult life, life was so busy, I never had
Yeah.
much time or brain space for it. I was just working lots and traveling and then really it was my pregnancy that encouraged me to get back into it. Because once you're pregnant, you're spending a lot of time thinking
Right.
about sort of like your legacy or your life as a whole and what you're going to do, what it would teach this child that you're having.
Yeah.
Um, and it really encouraged me to like get back into poetry, which I really
Mm.
loved. And poetry is perfect because it's very bite-sized. I had the capacity for it because it was, you could spend a few minutes just writing a poem and then move on with your day. And
Yeah.
so it was just the perfect amount for what I needed.
Yeah.
Um, and then I decided to start writing this book because I actually ended up having a miscarriage in
Yeah.
that pregnancy. And it helped me process my grief a lot and capture those moments that I was afraid that I would forget years from now. And I was working with other women that had experienced a miscarriage and also just advocating for a change in the care that women were having here in Vancouver Island.
Mm.
And I decided that I should publish my poetry as a collection also to help other women know that they weren't alone in the experience. And
Mm.
so that is where Someday Somewhere Beautiful comes in. It's a record of my experience, but it's also very hopeful, as the title, I think, acknowledges too. So it's definitely a time capsule from that period of my life, and I hope it encourages other women that are going through similar experiences or wrestling with that kind of grief for what they've lost. And so yeah, it's been just a huge chapter of my life, and I'm excited to share it. Yeah.
Wow, that's such a pulling story you've got in there. That's such a start actually. That's such something, getting someone started into writing into poetry, and which I must say that it's even beautiful that you have to make poetry out of the experience, and you have to like bring something out of every sad experiences or everything
Yeah.
we've been through life, positive or negative, etc. That's a beautiful one. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to ask you, how has your cultural upbringing or faith
Yeah.
background influenced your writing style, if in any way?
I think especially growing up in Ireland, you grow up with a lot of like myths and legends and local folk stories, and so that has really shaped
Oh,
the way I use language and my imagination, and that's had an impact in more ways than I can probably say. And then even like just from like the book title, it's very nature themed, and the poetry is very nature themed as well.
wow.
And the landscape in Ireland is just beautiful. And
It
so
is.
growing up close to these rolling hills and this coastline and these mountains, it has also greatly impacted my
Mm,
poetry and my writing. But I also grew up in the church, and these parables and these stories, these layered meanings that you have.
yeah,
It's really impossible to say how much it has influenced me, but I know
absolutely.
it's really had a positive impact on that.
Mm,
And so yeah, I touch a lot too because it the book itself also touches on my experience immigrating to Canada. And so this transition from Irish culture into Canadian, it's influenced my motherhood, and I write about that too. So it's
mm.
quite, yeah, it's quite large, the scope that
Wow.
I write about.
Well, I think you've got a lot of things encapsulated in this
Yeah,
single book, and you've mentioned this, you've talked about this, you've explored this, and I think it's really interesting because it makes the work to feel very rich. When you have
yeah,
different themes and different titles and different subject lines being talked about in a particular
yeah,
collection of poetry, it makes it so rich and so diverse that if a writer or if a reader do not, find something beautiful in this part, they can always find something else in there that they can talk
yeah,
about. They can always find something else that they can reach to. And I think that's one of the richness of literature, the richness of poetry, the
yeah.
richness of writing in its entirety. Thank you for mentioning that. And I was just being curious, just in case we have some, of course, viewers who are just getting to know about your style of writing, your work for the very first time, and who haven't really read any of your books. Could you tell us about some of the themes, some of the subject lines, some of the
Yeah.
messages, your mission, and actually what you aimed to achieve with this book?
Yes, the themes are always, I think the underlying theme is always hope.
Mm.
That
Oh,
even in the poems about grief, I do try to end it on a note of like what if or what might come down the road.
mm,
But I do touch on themes as like as grief, as mentioned, and
mm,
then this belonging that's comes from my experience as an immigrant here, and I think grief and the theme of belonging, it's something that we all encounter, and I just want people to
mm,
know that they're not alone in it. And
mm.
so it's I feel like, just as you mentioned, you're never alone with a book. I feel like whether
Absolutely.
it's on poetry or literature, whatever it is. And
Mm,
so my hope is to just, as terrifying as it is, to be authentic and very raw with my emotion, just to help other people know you're not alone in this. I've
absolutely.
gone through similar things, and just to help us sort of like journey together towards something more hopeful in the end.
Absolutely. I love that. I love your take on that. That is so interesting and so powerful. Thank you for mentioning. And also, poetry can often feel very personal on
Yeah.
most levels. From the poems I've read, from the ones I've written myself, and from that of other authors that I've encountered, it could sometimes feel very personal in some levels. Was there any poem in this collection that was particularly emotional or difficult for you to write?
Um, I think yes, it was probably. Oh, I have to flick through the book now.
Yeah, table of content. Table of content.
Um,
Sometimes even myself, when I go to some of my old writing and I go to the table of content, I'm like, yeah, there's some of my favorite, like Whose Fault, Fate or Mine. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
such a powerful one to write. And I've
yeah,
even got that from people who have read it, reviewers like, how did you write this? That's so hard. That is so
yeah,
tearful. And I see a bit of myself in your writing. I'm like, oh, thank you. That's one of the most
yeah,
beautiful feedback I've ever gotten. It gladdens my
yes,
soul. And I know there's some poem, even myself, there's some poem in my collection that's so hard to write. And I'm like, I remember
yeah,
when I wrote this, I was shedding tears on my bed. Yeah. There's
yeah,
some poems I wrote, I was shedding tears on my bed. And others I wrote. alongside. So there are some that leaves me with some memory that yeah, I remember what
Yeah.
I did or what happened, or how I wrote this, or
Yeah.
what inspired that, etc.
Yeah, it's amazing to see your growth from that point. Like now
Mm.
looking back, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
look how far I've journeyed since then, and really like poetry or any forms of writing, you're just giving voice to the experience other people are feeling. So they
Yeah.
might question it, but it's like, well, you understand grief if you don't understand this grief, and
Mm.
it's fine. But to answer your question, I think there's a poem in this book called Sparrow Fly, and it's one of my favorites, but it was one of the hardest to write, um, because I think there was just some issues with the medical care I received as well.
Oh,
Um, in having my miscarriage, that
wow.
was very triggering for me and very challenging.
Wow.
And so I went back like just the beginning of last year to the hospital and was like, hey, can we improve the care for women that are going through this?
Wow.
Because this poem speaks a part of I mean, it's a few lines in there, but um, just some things that I felt like could be done better. And the hospital was very receptive, and we've been able
Wow.
to help improve the care across Vancouver Island hospitals.
Wow.
Um, and one aspect of the care that they received. I mean, other doctors were wonderful to work with, but I think
Mm.
that's also part of the confusion with this kind of a loss too, is that some people really don't know what it is to go through it. Um,
Mm.
and so even just, I mean, part of the book is also advocacy for
Wow.
people who aren't going through this kind of a grief or this experience, to be like, this is what it was like for me, and maybe you understand better what
Yeah.
it feels like for those in your life that are going through it.
Yeah.
And so I've really tried to, yeah, write about the hard stuff
Feel
just to
that.
also help bring change to some parts.
Mm.
So
Wow.
but yeah, as you
Mm.
mentioned, it's really challenging. It's really hard to bare your soul. Um, but I felt like it wouldn't it wouldn't be worth the effort if I wasn't going to be completely honest. And so
Mm.
I wrote it, and I just hoped and prayed that the world would be compassionate in their
Wow.
response
Oh,
to
wow.
it. And so far they have been.
Wow.
And I've had a great response so far. But in the moment it was very scary. But going back to talking about legacy in my pregnancy and stuff like that too, and what I wanted to teach my future children is I wanted to teach them to be authentic and be
Mm.
honest and do these sort of things for themselves in their life. And so that's just a part
Mm.
of the message. There's many layers, as you can tell, to this book and this experience for me.
Wow. Wow. This is really amazing. This is so captivating. This is so brilliant. And I'm so impressed by your amazing responses to this question. So deep as well and so
Yeah.
thought provoking. Thank you very much for
Thank
sharing.
you.
And I
Yeah,
also wanted
thank
to
you for those questions. Yeah.
absolutely, and I also like to ask you, Sophia, when you were putting together this collection, did the poems come together naturally over time, or did you intentionally write with a theme in mind? And also, how has writing this collection of poetry changed your life, or motherhood, or perception about life?
Yes. When I was going through it, I was just writing to process my feelings and my grief. Um, and so I really wasn't thinking about publishing it as a book.
Wow.
But then by the end of the experience, I had so many poems, and I realized a little bit more of how they could be helpful for other people.
Yeah.
And so I decided then to put it into book form and send it to publishers, and Kelsey Books they're my publishers for this book, and they were really wonderful in
Wow.
handling it. And so I didn't start out that way, but that's the journey that it's taken me on.
Mm,
Um, but it has, I think it's changed my outlook on life and just how I value, I would say like the strength of women. And now years later, I have my son who's almost 3 years old, and knowing how delicate life is and what we can lose and things like
yeah.
that, I really value him so much more, I feel like. And
Wow.
um, I value my motherhood and the role I can play here at home, and even in the hard moments.
Mm,
And it's definitely made me more grateful for what I have. and for the friends and family that came and supported us during those hard times. And um, it sounds cliche to say, but it does
Yeah,
make you stronger. And yeah,
yeah. This
it's
has,
been hard, but it's been, in the end, it's been so hopeful,
yeah.
and good has come out of it, I would certainly say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a beautiful one you've been mentioning so far. Thank you. Thank you for that. And there's this question that pop up in my mind now. I would like to ask you as a poet, how would you define poetry if someone asks you, maybe you're in a class full of learners, full of children, full of maybe post 14, post 13, post 12, and you see yourself teaching them poetry,
Yeah.
and one of the kids get to ask you, how would you define poetry? What does poetry means to you? As a poet,
That's
how
the
would you
hard one.
answer that question?
Yeah. I would just kind of describe it, I suppose, a little bit, and this would be a hard one maybe to explain to children, but my immediate thought was that it's kind of like a heart murmur, where you're just kind of, it's your immediate response to life.
Hmm.
And you don't, the difference, of course, between poetry and other writing, even in format, is that poetry is far more free. There's so many
Hmm.
different ways that you can write it
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
format it, and it's sort of just as it is, like your thoughts just being spilt out onto a page in their rawest form sometime. And of course, you go
Hmm.
back and you edit if you do want
Yeah,
to present it to the world sometimes, but it's just a very raw thing,
yeah.
and you don't have to worry about punctuation and stuff like that if you don't want to.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, that's what I love about poetry. It feels a little bit less processed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful answer you've got in there. And something I love to say is the fact that I think of poetry as, if someone get to ask me that way, I would say poetry is the language of the soul of the
Yeah,
poet. At that
yeah,
time, that the poem was written, but I have a clause of time to it. I say, yeah, poetry is an expression of emotion, or
yeah,
poetry is the language of the soul of the
yeah,
poet at
yeah,
that particular time that the poem was written. Because
yeah,
sometimes the poem written by a particular poem about a year ago could differ entirely from one written now, could differ
yeah,
entirely from the ones he or she wrote like 5 years ago. That's why I
yeah,
love to put a clause of time to it.
yeah,
Sometimes a poem can convey happiness, it could convey sadness, it could convey
yeah.
heartbrokenness, it could convey joy, it could convey momentum, prosperity. It's just a whole lot, really. And
It's
it's so,
unrestrained, and
yeah,
it
it's
doesn't have to be categorized. Poetry is
at
poetry. It
all.
doesn't have to be like, oh, like fiction and nonfiction. Other forms of
Absolutely.
literature are so labeled, while poetry
Yeah.
is very free. So I
Yes.
love the way you describe it. That's exactly
Mm.
that's the perfect words. Yeah. Language of the
Wow.
soul.
Yeah, language of the soul. Language of the soul of the writer. Quite an amazing one. Thank you. Thank you for your lovely contribution, Sophia. Very amazing. And
Thank you.
from reading your amazing bio, it was mentioned that you were honored to be chosen for the Confluence Fellow
Yeah.
2025 to 2026. How does that make you feel as a poet?
I feel very honored, like I was chosen as part of, as along with several other
Yeah.
haiku poets, based on they said my strong body of work, and so
Wow.
that feels like such a privilege.
Yeah.
And I'm just very grateful for this journey and where it's taken me and how it's improved my skill and the ways that I can
Mm.
express what I'm feeling, and but also that it's being received by other people. And yeah, there's a lot of like essays and work to do as part of that fellowship, but I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy
Mm.
the fellowship with other poets, because
Yeah.
poetry, at least for me, is a very isolating thing. You
Yeah, it
often
can
are doing
be.
it in those quiet
Yeah,
moments when you're processing life. Um,
absolutely.
and so to be able to join with other poets, like even in this conversation, learning about how you write poetry, it's one of those moments where it becomes more of a social thing, and I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it. So there's so much to learn from each other. It's great.
absolutely. Wow. That's an amazing one. Thank you. Thank you. And the collection seems to balance vulnerability and hope. Was that
Mhm.
construct something you intentionally explored while writing? And also, looking back now, did writing this collection change the way you see beauty or meaning in everyday life?
I would say I'd hope that the way I view beauty and meaning in everyday life was there before, but it
Mm,
just gave me confidence to maybe talk about it and share about it more.
wow.
Um, and like this was my first like big poetry collection that was published. I've
Oh,
had two more since then, but it really I've been writing poetry for a few years now, but this gave me confidence in my voice and in the way I
mm,
view the world. And other people have been very responsive to that and very encouraging.
wow.
Also in the moment when I was writing it, that was a decision that I made was to be hopeful about
Mm,
the things I was going through, even if it was hard. And
yeah.
I think that's also just a huge part of my Christian faith as well, is that there is great hope um, at the end of all this. And so that was something I did want to share. It was something I was already feeling and experiencing and believing in. Um, but I didn't want it to be a book that people come to and are leave depressed.
Yeah,
My
right.
hope is to share hope with the world. And so
Absolutely.
that's something that came naturally to me, but it was
Mm,
also something that I was also trying to very intentionally communicate in my work.
mm,
Yes.
wow. Beautiful. Very beautiful. Quite amazing, powerful, and wholesome. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much for sharing. And apart from Someday, Somewhere Beautiful, do you have any other works that you've authored or say currently working on?
Oh, yes, I am working on a book now that focuses on my experience as an immigrant. And my experience as an immigrant has been it's been very easy compared to what a lot of other people experience.
Right?
But I think it's such a hot topic politically too in our
Yeah.
world right now. And so I would just love to explore the theme of belonging, not just as part of these poems, but as a standalone work. Um,
Mm,
and what that means for me and what that might mean for other people. And so that is something that I'm just working through right now. Yeah.
mm.
Um, and it keeps me sane in my motherhood. To have projects, to have poetry, I couldn't do it. I don't think I could be as good of a mother if I didn't have some creative outlets. And so it brings me joy, and I hope it brings other people joy. And I will probably always be working on something. And I hope my son will grow up and appreciate that for sure.
Wow. Wow. That's an amazing one. You've got a beautiful mission with that. That's a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a very good thing to say.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And as a published author, what sort of advice would you give other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing, especially people that write
Yeah.
in your particular genre? What advice would you give people like this?
I think the one that surprised me just from my own experience was
Yeah.
that at some point you just have to decide that you're done with the work. Even now, as I look back through these poems, 1 year later, I'm like, oh, I could have said that differently. I could have formatted that, or maybe I should have
Yeah.
added this poem instead. Um, and it's always easy to be very self-critical, but I think at some point you just have to decide that you're done
Yeah.
with the work, as hard
Yeah.
as that might be, and then
Yeah.
just to go and do something with it or to move on to something else. Um,
Absolutely.
it's never going to be perfect. Don't wait for it to be perfect.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I have a hard time with that. I can be very self-critical. I
I
go
know.
back and I'm like, oh, I think I formatted that incorrectly or something. But we live and grow and learn, and we just have to move on from it. But that's been a hard lesson for me.
Mm,
But just don't wait for it to be perfect.
wow.
The world needs to hear these things. So
Absolutely.
just
They
put
need
it
to
out
hear
there.
these things. Absolutely. Some people are waiting to read your book. The world
Yeah.
needs to hear this thing. Someone is
Yeah.
going to be healed by your words, by your
Yeah.
the amazing things you've created. And you may
Yeah.
not sometimes see you know, you may not see the what I'd say, or you may
Yeah.
not know how impactful your work may be on
Yeah.
someone's table until someone read it and get back to the whole you saved my life with those
Yeah.
words. Those words are
Yeah.
so healing to me. And I find strength in your lyrics. I find power, I find hope and encouragement in your lines. Your poetry is life-saving. And just that alone is very satisfying. It's
Yeah.
very satisfying. It gives
Yeah. It makes it
joy.
all worthwhile.
Yeah, it's just so satisfying. I'm looking for another word to describe how fulfilling that makes you feel as a poet. That your
Yeah.
works are being impactful, that your words are touching lives and imparting souls. It's a beautiful thing. It
Yeah,
is.
even for one life to help one person, it would
Yeah,
be worthwhile. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
poetry saves like the poetry that we write, it saves the poet first, and
Mm.
then it goes on to help other people, right?
That is so true. It saves the poet first, then it extends to saving other people that reads it.
Yeah.
Oh wow. That is very true. That is very true. And as somebody like myself who writes more in the themes of pain and lamentation, on the themes of human experiences, I've got somebody like,
Yeah.
wow, that speaks to me. Your words is so powerful. Thank you for this amazing book. I'm like, oh, thank you. That is really satisfying to me. It makes me blush a lot. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. Somebody find it fantastic. Somebody enjoyed it. Somebody find it
Yeah.
life-saving, etc. Yeah, it's a beautiful one. It is.
Yeah, I look forward to reading more of your work now that I know that you're a poet too. I have a lot to learn from you as well.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have a book published?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I'll tell you about it afterward because this interview is about you and not about me.
Oh, it's a conversation between poets. I think we can both lift each other up. I'm okay
Yeah,
with that.
I know, yeah, but they're all available on Amazon. Yeah,
Yes.
we've got quite a lot in there. I'll tell you more about it, particularly when I stop recording.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview, I would love to pick up someday, somewhere beautiful. On what platform can they get it from?
Well, you can get it directly from my publisher, Kelsey Books, and of course on Amazon. I think almost everything is on Amazon, so that's an easy one, and you can see some of my other works there too,
Mm,
to get an all-around picture. But yeah,
yeah.
Amazon or Kelsey Books.
That's amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Sophia Conway, yeah, Someday, Somewhere Beautiful, a West Coast Motherhood, directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on the publisher's website and also on our website. I also left a link to Sophia's social media pages for possible followings. I must say a very big thank you to you, Sophia, for joining me today to have this beautiful, mind blowing, educative, thoughtful, compelling, and life saving conversation around the making of Someday Somewhere Beautiful. This is
Thank
so
you.
awesome. I enjoyed every bit of it, so captivating. I learned a lot in the process, and I want to say a very big thank you for joining in.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. It's been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.